Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A lot going on again. OECD report this morning. Is Mr. Corbyn going to surprise us?
I think there might be a surprise in that a little bird has suggested to me that he might again go on the issue of forcing every school in England to become an academy.
Didn't he do all 6 questions on that last week?
He did all 6 questions on that last week. Since then, it's an issue that's continued to be very difficult for Nicky Morgan, the Education Secretary. She had a pretty bloody session in the Commons at the dispatch box with problems being put forward by her own MPs. And it's been suggested to me that Mr. Corbyn might decide to do that again. That's, as ever, I would put a big caveat on that. And if he doesn't, then, you know, it was only a little tip. But I think he might do that.
Covering.
Which is interesting, though, because I think Labour believes genuinely that they're onto something with this. Partly because they know that there's a real unease among some of the Tory benches, among Tory local government, and that we know already that there are going to be tweaks to this plan. Not a big climb down. We know there are tweaks on the way.
But I was talking to some Labour MPs. They were saying it's quite a big issue in Westminster, but it's not a huge issue in the country.
Well, it may not have cut through. It's the kind of issue that you think might become a big issue in the local elections. Next week, of course, we've got the biggest, most complicated set of elections we've had for some years.
Indeed.
In fact, the biggest set of elections we'll have in this Parliament. But it doesn't seem really, and you don't hear back from MPs that it's happening on the doorstep, but it seems that Jeremy Corbyn has fixated on this.
And he did well last week on it, so that may be why maybe that's why he's returning to it.
But we're also day 2 of the junior doctors' strike. Interesting that Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell chose to go to one of the demonstrations themselves. That was not the position of everybody in the shadow cabinet over this. Some people look at it very carefully.
And also Labour has Labour has a plan as well. It has an alternative. The pilot scheme is something he could urge on the Prime Minister, which would resonate, I would suggest, with the voters more than another round on academies.
Well, possibly, yes. Heidi Alexander, the Shadow Health Secretary, together with some Liberal Democrats and indeed a Tory backbencher, a former doctor, put forward the idea of trying out the new contract in some hospitals that was dismissed by Jeremy Hunt. But we'll see.
And would I be right in thinking Mr. Cameron would probably try to work in something on the anti-Semitism row?
It would be surprising if he didn't.
I mean, there's a letter, isn't there, from Oliver Dowden, so you would think it would be something he would raise.
Indeed. I mean, David Cameron is always very well briefed for Prime Minister's questions. He's also always armed with some zingers to chuck back, not just the answers to questions that he expects to come along. And look, this is a big issue for the Labour Party. It has been very controversial. It has become a problem for them. We've seen that with Jeremy Corbyn having to respond to it himself this morning. He's been accused of being too slow to respond on these issues previously. And it may well be, you know, I mean, I heard Lisa suggesting that actually in any case like this, there should be a suspension and an investigation. Naz Shah has had to stand down from her job working for John McDonnell, but she's still there in the party. She's still an MP.
That's a bigger step.
And that may not be the position by the end of today. It may not run, but there is going to be pressure. And with Shadow Cabinet members like Lisa saying maybe there should be a suspension, I think what...
Is there a head of steam building up, do you think, to suspend the whip from her? Well,
I think what we've seen in previous occasions like this, in the end, that's been the position. Whether it's been local councillors who, in the end, there's been had to be a suspension or an exclusion, it may well be that because of other events today in Westminster that the story sometimes fades away. That happens too. Don't forget, after Prime Minister's questions, there'll be a very serious and I think well-attended, probably quite compelling debate on the Hillsborough inquests yesterday. So in the way of these things, for good or for ill, in Westminster, sometimes stories fade away, just literally because a bigger thing comes along.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, after 27 years, the 96 people who tragically lost their lives at Hillsborough and their families finally received the justice they were entitled to. I welcome the fact the Prime Minister has apologised for the actions of previous governments. I join him in paying tribute to all those families who've campaigned with such dignity, steadfastness and determination to get to the truth of what happened to their loved ones on that dreadful afternoon. I also pay a very warm tribute to my friends, the members for Liverpool Walton, Lee, Halton, Garston, Halewood and other MPs who've relentlessly campaigned with great difficulty over many years. I hope the whole House today will be united in demanding that all those involved in the lies, smears and cover-ups that have so bedevilled this whole inquiry will now be held to account. Last week, the Prime Minister told the House that he was going to put rocket boosters on his forced academisation proposals. This weekend, in the light of widespread unease, including amongst his own MPs, it seems the wheels are falling off the rocket boosters. And the government is considering a U-turn. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether or not the U-turn is being prepared for or not?
First of all, let me join the right honourable gentleman in praising those who campaigned so hard and so long to get justice for the victims of Hillsborough. This whole process took far too long, but I think it is right, and I pay tribute to the right honourable member for Lee, that we had that Jones report. We responded to the Jones report. I also want to mention the former Attorney General who took the case to the High Court for the government himself to argue for that vital second inquest. Turning to the issue of academies, I haven't yet met a rocket booster with a wheel on it, but I'm sure rocket science isn't really my subject, and I think apparently it's not his. I will repeat again, academies are raising standards in our schools, and I want a system where it's heads and teachers running schools, not bureaucrats.
Well, there wasn't much of an answer there, but so can the Prime Minister tell us whether he will? If the members opposite would be patient enough, they might hear the question I'm putting to the Prime Minister, which is another very simple one. Could he tell us whether he will bring forward legislation to force, against the wishes of good and outstanding schools, to become academies in the upcoming Queen's speech? Yes or no?
Obviously, I can't really preempt what's in the Queen's speech, but on this one example, I can help him out. We're going to have academies for all, and it'll be in the Queen's speech.
Mr. Speaker, we look forward to that, but there is still time for the U-turn, which I'm sure is at the back of the Prime Minister's mind. It's been reported that the government is considering allowing good local authorities to form multi-academy trusts. Ironically, this would actually give local authorities more responsibility for running schools than they have now, although the Prime Minister has previously suggested that local authorities are holding schools back. So why is this costly reorganisation of schools necessary for schools that are already good or outstanding? Why is it forcing it on them?
As I said last week, and it's good, I like repeats on television, I'm very happy to have them in the House as well. As I said last week, outstanding schools have nothing to fear from becoming academies, and indeed have a lot to gain. And just because a school is outstanding or good doesn't mean it can't have further improvement. Not least what we want to see is outstanding schools helping other schools in their area, often by being part of an academy trust. Now, he raises the issue about local authorities, but if you... Two questions so far, two very clear answers. Third question, third clear answer coming, so simmer down. Simmer down. Perhaps if you could deal with the anti-Semites in your own party, we'd all be prepared to listen to you a bit more. Of course, there are lots of ways that schools can become academies. They can convert and become academies. They can be sponsored by an outside organisation. They can work with other schools in the area. They can look at working with the local authority. Those schools that want to go on using local authority services are free to do so. I'm very clear. Academies are great. Academies for all is a good policy. What we're now seeing from Labour, I sense, is they're now moving in favour of academy schools. Perhaps when he gets his feet, he could say, does he favour academies or not?
Jeremy Corbyn. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will be aware that sometimes repeats on television get more viewers than the first time round. The Chief Executive of the largest academy chain in London, the Harris Academy, has warned that a far more fundamental thing that the Prime Minister should be worrying about, whether schools should become academies or not, is actually teacher shortages. The academies, Mr. Speaker, don't want this. Parents don't want it. Teachers don't want it. Governors don't want it. Conservative councils and MPs don't want it. Who actually does want this top-down reorganisation he's imposing on our education system?
OK. Question 4, answer 4, here it comes. He says who wants this? Well, let's start with Michael Wilshaw, the Chief Inspector of Schools. I don't know, I think someone quite worthwhile listening to. Academisation can lead to rapid improvements, and I firmly believe it's right to give more autonomy to the front line. OECD, shall we try? They've been in the news today. We won't get too controversial. The OECD, I view the trend towards academies as a very promising development in the UK, which used to have a rather prescriptive education system, so they support it. What about endless academy trusts who support it? Now, he asked another question, very keen for full answers. If you shout, you won't hear the answer. Right. He asked about teacher shortages. The fact is, there are more school places and more teachers under this government than there were under Labour. Why? Because we've got a successful economy and we're putting it into our schools and our children's future.
Mr. Speaker, there are, of course, still record numbers of children in oversized classes and in supersized classes, and that is getting worse. And if he is looking for support for his academisation proposal, he might care to phone up his friends, the leaders of Hampshire, West Sussex and his own Oxfordshire County Council, who are deeply concerned and opposed by it. He might care to listen to Councillor Carter, the Conservative chair of the County Councils Network, who says the change will lead to a poorer education system. So why is he pushing it through with so much opposition, so much concern and such a waste of money when we should be investing in teachers and schools, not top-down reorganisation?
Well, I'm glad he's quoting Conservative council leaders, and because they keep the council tax down and provide good services, I hope we'll see more of them in 10 days' time. Now, on teacher supply, just to be clear, 13,000 more teachers than 2010, to give a wholly accurate answer to his fourth question. Again he asked about who else would support academies. Let me quote Helena Mills of the Burnt Mill Academy Trust, because she said this: I used to be very sceptical and resistant to academy status. But during the process of developing the academy, I've been increasingly convinced this is the way forward. That is what more and more people are saying. That is why 1.3 million more children in good and outstanding schools. That is why almost 9 out of 10 converter academies are good or outstanding schools. We're very clear on this side of the House. We back aspiration, we back opportunity, we back investment in our schools. We want every child to get the best. It's Labour that want to hold back opportunity and have one size fits all.
Mr. Speaker, there seems to be a pattern developing here. The pattern is quite simply this. He has a health secretary that's imposing a contract on junior doctors against the wishes of patients and the public and the rest of the medical profession. Yes. He has an education secretary imposing yet another Tory top-down reorganisation that nobody wants. When will his government show some respect and listen to the public, parents and patients, and indeed professionals who've given their lives to public service in education and health, and change his ways, listen to them and trust other people to run services rather than imposing things from above?
Well, I tell him the pattern that is developing. We can see 1.9 million more people being treated in our health service. We can see 1.3 million more children in good or outstanding schools. That's the pattern that's developing. A strong economy, investing into our public services. The other pattern that I've noticed, standing at this dispatch box, is I'm on my 5th Labour leader, and if he carries on like this, I'll soon be on my 6th.
That's all, folks.